meeting. So first do we have anyone that's called in? No, okay. First, we'll have a motion for the approval of the minutes from June 21st, July 14th, January 13th, and August 23rd, executive committee meetings. Can I have a motion? Betty? Linda? Any comments, questions, corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Okay, Scott, do you want to start off with your little talk show?
Happy to, Mr. Fennell. Most of these numbers are going to be repetitive for most of you, but for anybody watching the live stream, we'll quickly walk through some budgetary numbers.
Mr.
Do we
Sorrell?
need a motion?
Yep.
Okay.
We need a motion in a second.
Okay. Rachel, I need a second. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So all funds across the entire organization, the recommended budget is divided into sources and uses. Sources is where the money comes from. Uses are where the money goes. $148 million in change in sources. Just a shade under $151 million in uses. As is recommended in the budget book, but may or may not be altered during this committee meeting. This pie chart represents the recommended tax levy for next year, or for taxes payable next year. The blue and gray slides represent the operating levies of the county, and the pink and red represent the pension levies of the county. Quick note on EAV, or property values. Based on data from the Supervisor Assessment's Office, we conservatively estimated a 4% increase in EAV for taxes payable next year. Next year, as I've said in a couple of committee meetings, is also the quadrennial reassessment, and it's Dave's estimate that we'll see smaller increases, but much smaller increases, but increases nonetheless for taxes that will be paid in 24, 25, and possibly 26. The recommended levy is $29.4 million. That is a rate of 83.21 cents per $100 of equalized assessed value. That is 0.8 of a penny greater than your historic rate. In terms of the Finance Committee, in terms of what your oversight is, you have oversight of just a shade under $6 million in revenues and just a shade under $6.2 million in expenditures. For Executive Committee, your oversight is $54.1 million in revenues and $28.7 million in expenditures. The Finance Committee is responsible for roughly 4%. That $5.9 million in revenues is 4% of the organization's revenues, and that $6.2 million in expenditures is 4% of the total. Looking at the Executive Committee, $54.1 million is 37% of the total revenues of the organization, and it's 19% of the expenditures. General fund budget as of today is recommended balanced at $50,877,000 in change. The Finance Committee has $39,700 of revenue in the general fund, so it's less than 1%, and has just less than a 1.5%, somewhere between 1 and 1.5% of the expenditures. The Executive Committee, obviously because of all the state shared revenues and the property taxes that are collected in the general fund, those are under the purview of the Executive Committee. Your 2/3 have oversight of the revenues and 18% of the expenditures. We show this slide. So this is where the slide deck gets different for all the other ones, because we give you, this committee, a little bit of extra information. We've been showing this chart for a number of years now. This is, we title it Balancing for the Future. The dark blue area represents our actual reserves. The yellow or gold line represents your written policy of 24%. The blue hashed line represents your unwritten comfort level of having 30% reserves. And you can see at this point in time based on how we've forecasted revenues and expenditures going out. We will remain above the written policy through 2034, absent any interventions, and we'll dip below that 30% comfort level roughly a year before that. But the general fund is solvent and will be solvent for a number of years. Real quickly, showing the volatility of all of our sales taxes, we're starting to see some of the sales taxes starting to moderate, as would be expected based on the fiscal tightening that the Federal Reserve is impacting and having an impact on the local economy. That being said, corporate and personal income taxes still have not reached their peak. They continue to go up, and so this is contributing to a substantial amount of revenue for the organization. A couple of highlights in terms of policy initiatives that are in this year's recommended budget. As I noted on the tax slide, taxes go up by 8 pennies per $100 of equalized assessed value. How we get to that point, there's a 1 penny increase in the general fund, 3.13 pennies increasing in the risk management fund, the 0.8 of a penny increase in the VAC, a 4.67 decrease in IMRF, and a 0.54 increase in FICA. And FICA is to be pointed out. We didn't talk about that in county ops, but wanted to point that out because we're recapitalizing those reserves to meet our cash flow needs. So as I said, property taxes are recommended at 83.1 cents, and EAV growth is at 4%. That 4% growth it will combined at that 83.21 rate will generate $1.54 million of additional property tax revenue. Additional policy initiatives, just quickly, most of the committees walk through them as from their oversight. These are personnel-related changes. Coroner has an increase of 1 FTE. It's to strategy to reduce overtime and to better operationalize the actual morgue operations. Public defender, we continue the strategy to decrease those independent contractor assistant public defenders by adding another FTE there. State's attorney, it says 3 here, but I think we heard the state's attorney talk in the last committee, those of you that were here. 1 is for a public information officer, 1's for a domestic violence investigator, and really it's the third's backfilling a vacancy. Sheriff is 1.9. Part of that is a cleaning technician to do some janitorial work in the administrative spaces. 1 is sharing a communications staff member with county administration. And then there's obviously some full-time wages related to collective bargaining agreements. JDC has 2.2 FTEs in the recommended budget staffing. Their staffing model assumes 42-bed occupancy. The treasurer has requested, and we're recommending 1 position. That would be a middle manager type position. We heard yesterday at Ways and Means, VAC is asking for 2 FTEs that is directly associated with, from their perspective, caseload in implementing the new act. And then health insurance side, County Operations Committee today forwarded to the board next week the increase in premiums for our PPO plan and our qualified high deductible health plan. That, again, as we've done for the last several years, reflects our actuarial cost differences. And then real quickly touching on ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act. We've got a slide here that shows how we're going to recommend distributing those dollars next year. Economic development, we continue with our multi-year investment in the G-Beta partnership with OSF and Distillery Labs. We have the multi-year investment with Central Illinois Living Laboratory, which is a planning grant from IDOT. We also have continued investment in Justine Peterson. For FY23, the pre-construction work on the HHS campus will transition into construction in the spring. We expect to put those bids, the construction bids, out on the street during this winter, and that'll come to the board for bid awards and various bid packages. And then obviously we continue to look at community recovery and managing operational impacts as it relates to COVID. Here's a breakout of how we're recommending ARPA. This really is unchanged from the last time you saw it. The recommended budget for next year is $19.2 million spread across multiple areas. And then lastly, here's a little bit more detail. This is straight from the budget book in the ARPA fund. So that's high-level overview, Mr. Chairman. I will like to point out that there are no amendments from any of the other standing committees. So any amendments that will be made to the budget will be made by this committee here today.
Thank you, Mr. Sorrell. Let's see. We've got a timeline I want to keep up with to be respectful of the state's attorney's time. Are there any questions? So at this point, I'd like to go into executive session, and I need a motion and a second to do that for
Pending litigation and probable litigation.
those two. Can I get a motion? Thank you, Mr. Ricker. Second, Mr. Rosenbaum. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Excuse me, same sign. We will go back here to the little room. Is that what we plan on doing, Scott? Yep. Okay, 402.